You're listening to Tipped Off, where leaders across the service industry share insights on operations, tech, and team success, powered by TipHaus.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Tipped Off. And today we have a very special guest and a good friend of the company and personally, Josh Goodman, joining us from PourMyBeer/PourMyBev. So Josh, for listeners meeting you for the first time, give us a quick intro to yourself and tell us what PourMyBeer/PourMyBev does, as we got to see recently the name change here.
Thanks, Kirk. It seems like ages since we got together.
About 72 hours. Yes.
Yeah. RLC, baby. So who I am, Josh Goodman. I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, big into sports growing up. We found our wrestling kinship there. Wrestled, played football, earned a scholarship to college for football in Pennsylvania. Really didn't know what I wanted to do after college. I was one of those communication degrees. It's like, there's a great episode of The Simpsons, like, what are you going to do with that communications degree? Anyways, so I ended up getting into sales while I was in college, selling Cutco knives. And that's where I realized I liked business. I liked sales, entrepreneurship. And that kind of led me down a path of doing that for a little bit, went into corporate IT staffing for a stint. I would say decided I didn't like working for people, maybe I'm unemployable, one of the two. I went down the path of trying to find a business that would excite me, because no offense to the knives or the staffing, but when someone would say, "Hey, what do you do?" and I was always like, it's kind of boring, and that led me to a problem that I kept seeing when I'd go to bars and restaurants, which kind of leads me into what PourMyBeer/PourMyBev is. I saw that it took about 18 minutes and 7 steps for just an average Josh like me to go into a bar and get a beverage. And I said, that's ridiculous. It's, it's been done that way for, over 1,000 years. Why has that not evolved? And so I decided to, be ignorant and try to solve that problem from no engineering background, no, real startup experience, but I'm capable of solving that problem. So there's a longer version of that in a book I wrote, but that's the abridged version. It kind of brings you up to speed of now we're in 600 locations. If you go into any one of our locations, you get your tab opened. It's connected to an RFID QR code or either one, and then you're able to pour your own beverage, and you get charged for whatever you pour. So that's beer, wine, cocktails, soda, coffee, kombucha. We're liquid agnostic. We treat all beverages equally. So yeah, that's a little bit of, hopefully gives your listeners a taste for what we are.
It does. And it also explains, it's safe to assume that you started with beers as PourMyBeer, and then as you became that liquid agnostic, PourMyBev came to exist. Is that a fair statement?
That is well, it's actually the pandemic, not to give anyone
Sure.
PTSD, but during the pandemic, one of my advisors said, have you ever wanted to do a project that you just didn't have time to do? And that project was to create like a mothership database where all of the transactions got fed to. Because really, all of our systems were independent. They were servers on, 400 different locations at the time. And we fed that into a database where we could see what was poured across all of our locations. I think it was around 11,000 lines. And the unanimous winner wasn't beer for PourMyBeer. It was margaritas. So
wow.
I was like, well, we can't change our name to Pour My Margarita. That's kind of a little, off. So we went with PourMyBev. And so, that's I would say the evolution in a nutshell.
I love it, man. I love it. And so for listeners, if you have ever encountered a space where you are able to pour your own drink, you're charged by the ounce typically, right? Is that correct?
Yep. 1/10 of an ounce.
Oh, wow. All right. So you're getting down to it. Well, that is going to be then Josh Goodman and his company behind it, man. And it's a great, great system. I have utilized it several times at a couple bars up in Seattle. And to your point, there's no line. There is no waiting, right? That's the goal here is I've already pre-authorized this. I know I'm going to get charged by ounce. My favorite was I'm going to have 3 ounces of everything, right? I'm going to make a flight of myself, see what I enjoy. And then I'm going to probably drink too few many of those. And we'll have some problems after that. That's how things go. So I love it, man. Tell me, you mentioned, you're coming from a football background. We discovered that we did have a similar wrestling background in the past, but tell me, that's what routine, that's discipline, that's practice, that's, a lot of lack of excuses, bluntly, that you have to accommodate with it. How's that mind shape help you when it comes to leading a company, running a company, like, understanding entrepreneurship? And bluntly, Josh, you mentioned something that I loved of like, there's a little bit of ignorance to starting a business. Now you have to just believe you can do it. The more you know, sometimes I think the more you can psych yourself out into the reasons that you can't do it. So tell me how those all kind of led you into to Pour My Bev.
Yeah, looking back and analyzing kind of my sports evolution, for someone who ended up breaking the college school record for solo tackles, I did not start my freshman year in high school that way. I didn't see the field one time as a JV athlete on the football team. So to go from that freshman year of just really kind of harsh reality, like, hey, you didn't get to even be on the field. You just had to watch everyone else play. With football, wrestling, any of these sports, like they're all adversity driven sports. Like you have to go through the pain. You can't go around the pain. And one of my favorites, I'm sure you had this in your wrestling days, was at the end of practice, we'd have what's called PTA, pain, torture, and agony. So it was, that's where you got to see you saw people like, just quit. And I think that mentality of like, all right, well, that guy's a quitter. I'm not a quitter. I'm going to keep moving. And but yeah, so that, I would say all of that led to, all right, well, I'm no stranger to adversity. I'm no stranger to getting, kicked in the teeth, kicked wherever. I'm just going to keep moving forward. And I think that's been at least something that's helped me in difficult times that we've had as a company.
I believe it, man. And I know our couple of our VCs and some of the groups we chatted with were blunt about like some of the things they look for, and it caught me off guard. Obviously, business success, acumen, things that they're paying attention to. But when they're seeing first-time founders, or at least first-time venture capital founders, one of the first things they look for is, were you in sports? And particularly, were you in individual sports where, you really had to drive something on your own, and the losses land on your shoulders, the successes as well, of course. How do you handle that? So it was always interesting to see. And I think, sports certainly play a lifetime shaping experience, right? I mean, it's something that really helps define who you are if you lean into it, right? And so I love it, man. Tell me, you obviously you work with a lot of operators across hospitality. Pour My Bev is fascinating. And for those users out there say, oh yeah, I get it. You put, a tap in there, it saves, you don't have to have as many bartenders, or the guests are serving themselves. Yeah, possibly. Tell me a little bit though, like what are some of the creative ways? What are things that people aren't necessarily thinking or seeing? What is something maybe you didn't even have in your sales pitch arsenal because you didn't think of it, but you've seen an operator bring into life and it's been working well for them?
Yes. I mean, something you said that just triggered something I feel like your listeners should be more aware of too, is it's not just opening a tab and then pouring, it's the connectivity to the different systems. And, obviously TipHaus has to connect to every type of system. And in some cases, like 12 systems in one airport. But, that was something I was ignorant about. I always talk about what's called the hospitality hamburger. So, the bottom bun is the check-in process. And then the meat, that's that's all the transactions that take place during the visit. And then the top one is the checkout process. And so when I first started the company, again, very ignorantly, I just focused on the meat. I just focused on all the transactions in the middle, really not taking into consideration the check-in process or the checkout process. So if you were to visually picture our first version, it was the most beautiful meat you could ever see with some condiments. The buns were stale, nasty, disgusting, probably green. And that was, that was the harsh reality when I actually went to one of our locations in Richmond called the Circuit. And I'm from Richmond, Virginia. So I wanted all my buddies and family to come check it out because it was this big like coming home party. And we go there and the line is wrapped around the block. And I was like, well, I know the owner, so I can get us in the back door. But I was kind of disappointed because the whole reason I started my company was to kill lines, to kill waiting. And now I just displaced the line, to get in. And that's where I realized, man, I talked to the owner. He said, yeah, like the check-in process is brutal. Like we have to check them in on our point of sales. We got to check them in on your system. And then when they're ready to leave, we got to find their stuff and then check them out again. He said, that's got to be resolved. And so I went very aggressively at Steve Fredette, the founder of Toast. I offered to name my next child after him, whatever I could do to get him to put me in the front of the line for integrations. Thankfully, that humor did work, and we got integrated with Toast in a pretty aggressive manner, and eliminated that whole front end back end. So we had an actual hamburger that I would want to eat. The buns were amazing and the insides were great, but that would, going back to like the early days, that's something I just did not account for when I first started the company. And I think, going into the question more specifically, like of how it's been implemented, when I first started the company, it was it was a selfish thing for me. I wanted to make it easy for me to get a beverage. What I didn't account for is the impact on labor. For anyone in the restaurant industry, they're used to that 30% number of whatever your revenue is. That's your labor. With us, we have customers that are achieving 8 and 9 and 10% labor costs across the board. That was something I did not go into this thinking, oh, I'm going to solve this labor, challenge. And then, also I would say the liabilities that come with the labor. So it's not just paying the labor, it's the insurance, the potential lawsuits, all these other things get reduced by 60 or 70%. So again, that was, I think, made more clear during COVID. Another, I would say, blessing of COVID. But that was not my intention when I started the company. Was, hey, I want to make it. I want to reduce labor, inefficiencies.
No, I love it, and I like a few things you call out there. One is the ignorance of entrepreneurs, which we often have. It. The number one goal is, can we remove that ignorance, right? Like, can we learn and can we be adaptive as opposed to trying to like force feed our solution, let's say. But two is COVID. And like you mentioned something that I have said before, and I always feel a tinge at saying it, of like the blessings of COVID. This industry got shattered by it. And that's never to make light of that or to pretend that, we didn't have a very, very tough times during it. But we did similar, where we weren't making sales. People weren't tipping during COVID, of course, because doors weren't open. We had to stop charging our few customers that we had at that time. But it allowed us to double down on our product. Like, we could have either hung our hat up, or we could have said, we'll turn the lights off and turn them back on when COVID comes, lifts, whatever that may look like. However, what we just did was we said, well, let's go chat with our customers, double down on product. Let's make this really be something special. And then when doors started opening and consumers started dining out again, we had a better product than when we went in by light years. It was really like 6 to 8 months of us just being able to focus with not getting distracted on one-off needs for sales, and nothing of that nature. And it sounds like, like you solving your own dilemma of, Josh wants a beer faster. Other people probably want a beer faster too. Let's make this thing happen. So that's killer, man. You mentioned, okay, so staff shift. You need significantly less overhead on staff and the overhead surrounding staff, which is something I did not even think of that you bring up. Like, okay, so we're able to lower that. Tell me, like, what does the staff actually do on the floor then? If you're able to handle the beers, if you're able to handle the margaritas, of course, number one seller for you, how does that shift what the staff is doing, and what are the best operators doing to think that through, to manage even the tips and how to encourage tips still if the guests are doing things on their own, if the traditional bartender still has a role as kind of the lead of that organization as they typically are, or is it something that, all of those things still apply in a microcosm, but something X has changed?
One of the amazing things about what we do is similar to you guys, you get to work with just world-class operators, and they teach you. You're the student. So you're selling them a product that they're going to utilize, but they're also teaching you exactly how to use your product, which that's really what happened. Living in Chicago, just kind of the history of the company was founded in Maryland, moved to Chicago in 2014. That's where it really kind of started getting, I built my own product and launched it there. But one of our first big customers in Chicago was a place called District Brew Yards. And District Brew Yards, to paint the picture, was 4 breweries under one roof. So anyone that likes to go to visit a brewery, now you get to visit 4 under one roof. And they have world-class barbecue, which you and I both have a nice affinity for. So what they did, and what I broadcasted across any customer we ever had, was they had wall ambassadors. Greg Lemacki is one of the founders of District Brew Yards, and his whole concept is he's controlling the customer journey. So when you come into his front door, you're greeted by staff. They've got 4 terminals. Before you can get past those terminals, you're getting your tab opened and you're getting a card in your hand. And then there's people waiting when you go up the ramp to guide you towards the different breweries. So it's like, hey, Kirk, welcome to District Brew Yards. We have 4 breweries here. Each wall has 10 taps. At each wall, you're going to find an ambassador that's going to take you through, what the different products are on tap, and they're going to show you how to pour if you've never poured a beer before. But this is very much a, choose your own adventure concept. And then, once they get to the wall, that's where there's more engagement. And it's hey, have you ever poured a beer before? Here's some of the golden rules, like glass at a tilt, open the faucet the whole way. And it's just, you're not getting rid of people. You're just putting them in different areas. And then once you teach someone how to do it once, they're good to go. And that's where, one of the things that Greg Lemacki said to me, he said, he has like 10 other restaurants in the city. And he said, you know what? Every other restaurant I have, every night there's, dozens, if not 100 transactions that weren't done properly. He said, I may be losing $100 a night. I might be losing $1,000 a night. I don't know, because it's human error and you can't prevent that. He said, with your system, there's no chance that there's an error because it's all exact. You pour 5.3 ounces out of that faucet, it's going to automatically post to that, that tab. And then when they check out, it's going to see that on there. There's no room for theft because every single line is locked. So it's called a normally closed solenoid valve. So the valve does not open. So you could walk up to any tap, try to pour. It's not going to pour unless they've been given access. And the only way they get access is by being connected to an open tab, which again, that all of that was, again, being ignorant, did not know how much all that was going to cost going in, and, having, over 24 integrations with a variety of platforms, not just with point of sale systems, but, I think you and I discussed, pickleball being a big vertical, hotel lot, like we're integrated with hotel property management systems, private golf course management systems. So if you're a private club member, it automatically posts to your account. So that's something I definitely did not think about, know about, or going into this whole journey.
I get it. Yeah. You think all integrations are the same. You think this is going to be a smooth process. And then you realize, man, all of these businesses were largely built in their own silo, right? I mean, they kind of built it their own way, and you've got to meet them where they are because, yeah, if you want to pour them. But I love the idea of, touching on what you're mentioning, that it sounds like the staff has been utilized in a better way for hospitality itself, right? It's now truly the greeting of it. It's making sure you know what you're doing. It's making sure you understand the offerings around you. It is less that, they are not pouring your beer, and it's more that they're ensuring you have a great experience pouring your own drinks, whatever that may be. So added to the fact, I want to be at a place that has 4 breweries, that sounds lovely. Are they all owned by the same group, or are those 4 independent?
No, so so Burnt City was the anchor brewer. So Greg Lemacki and Steve owned Burnt City. And then they sought out other breweries that fit kind of a perfect niche where they built a little bit of a cult following, but didn't have the capital to open up a proper brewery or tasting room. So it was like Bold Dog, which was an interesting one because a portion of the proceeds went to, animal shelters and things like that. And then the other one was Casa Humilde, which was a Mexican brewery. And then the other was Around the Bend, and they had an amazing pistachio cream ale that I've yet to find a better pistachio cream ale. But and then the barbecue wasn't like just some random barbecue. It was this barbecue called Lily Q, which the owner of Lily Q, he cooked for Obama and Oprah and all these amazing people because he makes great barbecue. So you pair some burnt ends with some pistachio cream ale, and it's a pretty, with some self-pour, it's a pretty lethal combo.
I believe that. That sounds like a place I wouldn't leave, man. I mean, I love to hear it. So, when you're looking at what you're involved in, like if you zoom out, obviously you're CEO and founder of a business that's almost tapped into replacing, complementing one of the most traditional and oldest industries in the world. Like, what are you learning when you're thinking about from your own perspective? How are you leading change in hospitality inside your own company, right? Looking at that. And as an individual who is helping to reshift the hospitality industry that operators may be able to learn from. Like, what are some of the tough lessons? What are the things that didn't work? Or what are some of the things ideally that, really was a game changer for you that other operators may be able to learn from as well, Josh?
Yeah, I heard a quote recently from I think the chief information officer of Kava. She said something like, we're using technology not to, I think, diminish hospitality, but to heighten hospitality. Like,
Sure.
using it in a way that's making it a better experience. So, when you go to a 30, 40, 60, we have some 100 tap systems, that could be daunting and overwhelming. So we're trying to help some of our operators create a structure where AI can help determine what their guests might like. And then as that system becomes more robust, then it becomes more intelligent, and then you can, you're helping them have a better experience by taking some of the challenges that they might see when they first see it or feeling overwhelmed. And then there's nothing better than answering a few quick questions like, whether you like salted caramels or Jolly Ranchers, whatever. You answer a few questions like that, and now they understand your flavor profile. And going back to an amazing TED talk I heard about understanding your consumers, they have more information on you than you might realize just from a few short answers. So, and then if you go sample those products and you give them a thumbs up or thumbs down, it's going to validate or help the AI get more intelligent in what it should suggest. So I feel like that's where, I want to help push the conversation, because, we're in 600 locations, but I mean, you and I know there's 1 million liquor licenses in America. So that's a very tiny percentage of what's out there. I try not to beat myself up like, well, why aren't we in 6,000 locations? One of our customers recently said that. They were like, I mean, our customers, when I said that we're in 600, they were like, they said, there's no way. Like, this is a no-brainer way to run a business, and I will never run a business any other way than with self-pour, because it just takes so much of the other, I guess, things you typically have to worry about as a business owner off the table. So, what we're trying to do is we're trying to make it an easier fit for, especially with the enterprise accounts. We're trying to make it, whether it's CapEx or OpEx, just work within their what they can, I guess, do financially, because we know that it's going to reduce their costs of running the business. We know it's going to increase their revenue during peak times. And one of our customers sold their business for a few $1 million a few years ago, and he wrote a book. It's called. He was the owner of Augie's Draft House in St. Augustine, Florida, which it's a very unique destination where they've got this old street, and so Augie's sat right across this like a little dirt path from the oldest schoolhouse in America, which never had that on my bucket list, but now I can check it, I guess.
There you go.
But they, he went very deep with how to run a self-pour tap room in his book. I think it's called Drafting a Business, Drafting Up a Business. So John Felico, and he's been, again, just like I said earlier, he's been a great mentor for me. Sure. in the sense that, I mean, he would send me, I don't know, book emails, like those emails where you're like, does this thing ever end? But it's also like, wow, this is an insane amount of information. I always ask him, like, did you type this with voice to, he was like, no, I typed it. And I'm like, well, thank you.
Yeah.
That's
but yeah. That's incredible, man. And you need people like that. I think the industry, one of the greatest things about it is it's very, if you're a genuine person and you're willing to, listen and offer and be a part of a conversation, there's no shortage of people who are willing to share their knowledge and expertise and decades of experience and, business side, entrepreneur side. That is a absolute requirement, right? There's no way to get through this if you don't have people that are willing to share that knowledge and be a part of it. So I love to hear it. And you're mentioning, a little bit on the AI front, like what it can do from your perspective, what it can do for owners and operators. Obviously it's becoming a part of every business, but what do you see the biggest piece, like even outside of necessarily, like flavor profiles or just knowing the customer perhaps, but what's it doing to change hospitality operations from some of these amazing operators you're chatting with, the guest experiences, the beverage programs you touched on, but what is the larger picture of what you're seeing AI playing?
I think it finds blind spots for you that you would never see without it.
Sure.
So going back to that part about building our own database. So we called it, or I named it the BKG, like an electrocardiogram. So, that's for your heart. So this is for your beverage system. So the beverage cardiogram. So, when I created that, it was so we could have global visibility, but also give all of our locations better reporting, where we're in the process of transitioning it to have more of a, you can download the reports, upload them into any type of AI, Claude, GPT, Gemini, whatever. But what I've been doing recently is I'm taking people's reports, plugging them in there, And then we're able to pull information like dwell time. So dwell time is a term which is basically when does this person enter your facility and when do they leave, and how does that impact revenue? And one of the insights that came out of putting that into our system was that if you can get at least this one location, Golden Mill, if anyone's in Colorado, highly recommend checking that out. But if you can get the guest to stay 60 minutes or more, their tabs double. So it goes from like I think $17 for the average tab between 0 and 60 minutes. Once you get over that hump of 60 minutes, now your average tab is close to $32 or something like that. So having that type of insight where, okay, now how can we craft the guest experience to ensure that they stay here at least an hour? And that's just the tip of the iceberg where I think we can go when it comes to understanding what are the trends, like getting down into like, how should we set up our products? Even one of the other insights it pointed out recently was it said you sold 90 different products in the month of March. We recommend that, here's the 30 that did the best. Would you like me to find products that are similar to this in flavor profile or price per ounce? But it goes those layers deep. Just you just have to tell it to go down those layers, and that's what I think it's going to help the smarter operators, quite frankly. Which may be, not to get all philosophical, may spread the distance between the laggers and the leaders even further. But it's like it's there. It's a resource that any operator has access to. It's just a matter of kind of pulling yourself out of the business and working on the business versus in the business. Because if you're always flying the plane with just what you can see right ahead of you, like you're not gonna see that mountain coming at you.
Agreed, man. I like that. And, I agree with you that it's going to widen the gap between individuals. Are you willing to adopt this? Are you willing to find unique ways to use it? Right. It does not have to be the end all be all. We chat a lot on this podcast, particularly that it's not going to replace hospitality, but savvy operators will figure out how to enhance hospitality with it. You use a great example of if you're staying 60 minutes or more, you're probably ordering a second round of everything, right? Drinks, maybe another app. So your bar tab or your tab in general is doubling. What are the ways to do that? What can you recommend? What can your server make, as they touch a table and drop off something? What can they say? All of those items are going to be, it's a matter of statistics on how you play that game and can you get them over the hump? And AI can really help with that. It's fabulous at the recommendation and seeing the patterns and understanding that. So I love it, man. I think that's a great piece to leave that topic on, but I do want to switch it and maybe that topic comes up again. Josh, we're going to move into, I hesitate to ever call it a speed round, but I am looking for apples to apples comparison. So you have listened to an episode before, you're aware of what's coming. I like seeing how different operators stack up across the board, whether that's, actually restaurant hospitality operator, hotel operators, or entrepreneurs and vendors supporting the business. So first question always, tell me, what is your favorite restaurant concept or brand out there and why? What's it doing right now to stand out to you?
I don't know if it's because I just came back from a food hall conference, but that speaks to me, like an indoor outdoor food hall,
Sure.
where you can implement some play in that. So I would say the indoor outdoor food halls, you get a variety of products you get to choose from. It meets everyone's needs. It's more mobile, so you're not stuck sitting in a chair the entire time. Like your group could be standing up, some could be playing bags. You're not harnessed. Like you're able to explore. So I would say food halls.
I love it, man. There's one near me that I visit regularly for that exact reason. It feels a little more interactive and it's also easier for people to come and go. We got a big friend group and people have kids. So early, late, they have to depart sometimes, whatever it may be. And it gives you something to do, right? The table doesn't become shrunk down. You can switch around, but we'll play a lot of cornhole and have a good time with it, man. So next on the speed round is what's the biggest challenge facing restaurants? And what do you think the biggest challenge, I'll ask it as a two-parter actually. Biggest challenge facing restaurants today, what's going to be the biggest challenge facing restaurants 3 years from now if you kind of put on your future forward goggles here?
I think today it's providing a valuable experience or an experience of value. I don't know if that resonates, but it just coming off of hearing a bunch of leaders talk about their products and their businesses. some are focusing on, we give the best deal you can possibly get for $4 for chicken, right? So I think that was Church's, what they were leading with. Whereas Kava was, we're going to give you the freshest experience of, QSR that you can possibly have. So I think hospitality, it's tough to bundle that into one, like what's what are the biggest challenges, but I think there's going to continue to be a bigger gap between like very successful high end homes, I guess, that have a lot of discretionary spend, and then I think that middle. I think there's people that don't have an identity, whether they're a great value and they're, I don't want to call them cheap, but a value meal, and people that are providing a premium experience. I'd be nervous if I'm just stuck in the middle of like I'm neither, and that's where I think if they're not trying to figure out which direction to go, they're not going to have a direction to choose in a while.
I like it. I mean, you're referencing what economists will call the K-shaped economy, right? You have individuals that will be seeking value based on price and quantity of food that they can get for that price, perhaps. And then you have a ultimate experience and the value you receive from an experience. But I do agree, like the middle ground is getting pinched. Do you think that holds true? Is that also the same challenge 3 years from now? Is this something that operators need to adjust, or if that's a short-term piece, do they just need to weather this and eventually that middle ground will kind of come back, maybe that they're familiar with?
Yeah, that's a tough one to predict. I do think that as the boomers start, moving on to wherever they move on to after things go, whatever. But I think that that's going to create an interesting space in the hospitality industry, because you need to be a tech forward hospitality business, I think 10 years from now. I mean, even now, honestly, but it's just, you've got to cater to the people that are going to be spending all the money with you. I don't think 10 years from now, 70 and 80-year-old people are going to be the ones spending the bulk of the money. So you got to be aware of like what tools are out there to help you provide the best experience. And also supporting the staff, what does staff look like 5 years from now, 10 years, these are all things that you hear, the things you see the Weather Channel, right? You see, it's tough to find staff. The millennials or whatever don't want to work in restaurants. Like there's a lot of, but also I think that the education system, not to put my tinfoil cap on, I think the education system is going to get flipped upside down in the next few years. And maybe that means that there's a lot more opportunities for staffing in hospitality. And there's a lot of scenarios that could play out, but I think that people are always going to want to go out and get beverages. They're going to get drinks. They're going to get, good food and good experiences, and almost kind of have an escape from what their reality is to some degree, in a positive and negative way, so.
Absolutely. Hospitality is never going anywhere. I look at it like it's a major part of our community, of our culture. At some level, it's going to always be required, and savvy operators are starting to make those adjustments now with it. And everyone's taking a guess. It is in the future. It's an unknown, of course. So, you can make educated guesses at it, but there's still always some unknowns with it. But it is something you have to, at minimum, pay attention to. And if by some miracle you were listening to this podcast and you have not leaned into any form of technology or adapting, probably about that time here. So tell me, you've been in the hospitality industry. Everyone in the hospitality industry has a horror story. Tell me whether it's something you were a part of, whether it's something you just witnessed. Tell me a hospitality horror story, and was there a lesson from it perhaps to take away?
Yes. In 2022, 21, I think. Yeah, 21. We brought on our CTO. We'd never really had a CTO, which sounds crazy for a tech company to not have a CTO, right? And we were managing all of our integrations, and we were using, similar to you, I'm sure, like SSL certifications and things like that to pass APIs back and forth. Sure. And I was at my son's football game, and it was like a Friday night, and our CTO he's amazing. Carl has never had to worry about anything technically having, I would say, the sky falling, as you would say, right? And then that night, my phone just started getting blown up, because a lot of our top operators have my direct cell phone line. Sure. So it's a Friday night, and I knew that Carl was at a wedding. So I was like, I can't get a hold of Carl. And what had happened is our SSL certification did not auto renew,
Yep.
and all of the integrations just they instantly were turned off. So all these open tabs across our entire platform,
Oh,
uh, yeah, it talk it was
oh,
so. Needless to say, that was one of the scariest experiences. Like, it sounds weird saying that was scary, but like I just felt like I was letting our customers down.
mhm.
Now our system can operate without the integration. You just have to. It's not as fluid. It's like
Sure.
going back to that earlier story where you have to check everyone in and check everyone out. But that 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 was after that I got Carl a sign. You've probably seen him in like those warehouses where it says like it's been X amount of days since a fatal accident or something like that. So we've not had another fatal accident since then. But that was one of the I guess scarier horror stories that I experienced.
I believe it. It's no fun when you see your phone. I've had it. Your phone rings from one of the operators and you're excited. Oh man, I haven't chatted with that guy in a long time. And then another phone and another phone, and you're like, I get what's going on. They don't miss me. Something has happened here. So
Yeah.
never a heart dropping moment like seeing a few of your customers call. Early days at TipHaus, we of course we ran into that. SSL certs, we ran into daylight savings time we didn't account for. I think in our very first year, and that led to a headache, right? So always good times in the space, man. All right, last question I've got for you, Josh, and this one is always a fun one. So, tell me about two industry trends, and specifically what I look for here is like, tell me a trend that you plan on adopting or embracing, and you say, yes, I see where this is going, and we're going to hitch our wagon, we're going to ride this. And tell me one that you see and you say, honestly, no, I don't think by the time we pivoted or we adapted to it or we're able to bring that on, that it's still going to be around. That's just a fad. It's going to go right out the window. But tell me a difference between the two and which two you see.
Boy, that's a tough one. I don't want to say you might have stumped me, but I'm just trying to think of the best
Every
answer I
moment
can
that
give
goes
here.
by, my pride rises from stumping you. So, don't let me hold this for long.
Let's see. So industry trend, I would say that I'm excited about. I think anytime you start a company, you want validation that what you're doing is I don't know, is worth doing. So I think seeing that self-service is being applied in a lot of ways, even though it's not, I would say, widely deployed from a beverage perspective. The fact that I see, kiosks, QR codes, that just giving the guests control of their experience, that's something. I was just at a food hall in St. Pete, and I took our entire family there as one of our new customers down there called Central Park Food Hall. And they all were able to scan the QR code that I had started a tab on. And then they all ordered their own food. And then they individually got dinged when their food was ready, or, it was run up there to our table. And I was like, what a cool, everyone had a device. Now, not to promote everyone having a device, but, it was 13 of us and we all got to put our orders in. We all got what we wanted, but it was a simplified experience through technology. And I think that, just giving the guest access to, not just placing the order, seeing when it's coming, seeing, that visibility, and it's also an accountability. So I would say that that's something that I'm a trend that I enjoy seeing continue to be rolled out. And one that I'm not on board with, yeah, I've never been a big DoorDash person or big, Uber Eats. Nothing wrong with them. I just think that having a good meal, part of that having a good meal is going to the place and experiencing it at the place. So, and then also the cost associated with. I think one time I had a friend ordered, and actually one of our team members expensed Wendy's through Uber Eats or something like that, and it ended up being like $20 for the service of getting them the $10 meal. I'm like, that's just lazy. Like,
That is for sure, man. And I like both of those. I love, agreed on the everything moving towards a little more self-service automation, or at least more self-control, let's say, right? Like the individual is a little more in control of their hospitality experience, which I think is a great thing. And then, yeah, I understand entirely. Not that I'm not guilty of occasionally an Uber Eats or a DoorDash with it, but the fees really hurt when you see it, right? Like when you really look at what your $12 meal cost or your $20 meal cost, makes it a little easier for me to say, you know, I probably, if nothing else, should have gotten in my car and picked it up. Or agreed, like the experience is typically better at the restaurant, right? I mean, if fresher food, you can directly interact if something has gone wrong with your meal, or if something was missing or you wanted something else. Upsell opportunities, of course, are still there for the hospitality business. So it'll be very curious to see the long-term play from those. I don't think they're going anywhere particularly, but I don't think all the businesses are going to lean in as heavily as perhaps they have. So, Josh, I cannot thank you enough for joining us today on Tipped Off. And I do want to ask before you go, any of the listeners who want to get in touch with you, either want to learn more about your system or just connect, where would they go? How do they get in touch with you?
Well, I'd love if you went to Amazon and got the book, Tap the Big Idea. That's going to give you a very deep insight into the whole experience. But yeah, PourMyBev.com, that's probably the best way to find me. And yeah, we're on Instagram, all the socials.
Sure.
But yeah, happy to talk to anybody of your listeners that have questions.
I love it. And listeners, I will vouch that is a true statement. Josh is a wonderful person who shares knowledge willingly. So reach out, learn a little bit about PourMyBev, and, let it know how you can help, and we'll see what happens. But Josh, thank you again for joining this episode today, and I really appreciate it, man.
Thanks for listening to Tipped Off, the podcast for the service industry. For more tools and insights, visit TipHaus.com.